Welcome to a Tech Moment on Cannabis Tech. I'm your host, Christina Etter. In this podcast, we take just a few minutes to talk about some of the exciting science and technology that's changing and impacting the cannabis and hemp industries. And I've always kind of had this theory and never really had the, the know-how to back it up. But I've always thought that the Indica, Sativa hybrid designations that we use in the cannabis space are a little too broad. They're a little too general. It's like saying that all reds, whites, and rosé wines all taste the same. And we just know that that's not the case. I'm excited to bring onto the show today Alec Dixon, who is the co-founder of SC Labs and the director of client relations, and we're going to talk about the terpenes and what actually is going on inside those cannabis flavors and all of this that is happening with the cannabis strains, and why he believes, like I said, that the Indica Sativa designations just no longer apply. Welcome to the show, Alec. It is absolutely wonderful to have you here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Alec, before we dive into the topic of the hour, the first thing that I want you to do is just tell me a little bit about your background and what brought you into SC Labs and doing the testing that you've been doing in the cannabis space.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Alec Dixon. I'm originally from Roswell, New Mexico. I was in the Navy for 5 years on submarines, kind of getting out of the Navy on the East Coast. You know, I very faithfully found my way out to California. And I was in cultivation for a few years, kind of growing outdoor cannabis. Kind of moved to Santa Cruz, California, and started growing indoor cannabis. And while I was cultivating in my cultivation years, I was working within hydroponics retail stores, and so just early on developed a great passion for cannabis and shifted my life service from being a service to the military to plants and people. And so about 13 years ago now, me and three partners came together to form SC Labs. And the last 13 years kind of deep in the service and science of cannabis and understanding how to contextualize this plant from a scientific level. And so it's been one of the greatest educational experiences of my life. And I'm really happy to be here to share some of my passion for terpenes and cannabis. I fancy myself a high-level terpene nerd.
Nice. I think that's one of the things that I love most about what I do in the cannabis space too, is that I feel like every time I turn around, I'm learning something new. And so I recently saw an article that was published, and I believe that you wrote the piece along with one of your partners, in terms of these Indica Sativa designations that the cannabis industry has relied on for so long. And, we've talked to SC Labs in the past. We have covered the phytofacts, and we love the fact that we're finally getting to that point where people are breaking down these different compounds, and we know that the terps are really, what kind of bring out those effects in the various cultivars and the various varieties of cannabis. But I would love to have you talk about your phytofacts a little bit and what you've kind of discovered, and then we'll get into how that's actually changing, how the Emerald Cup is looking at cannabis as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Terpenes and cannabis, it's been a long kind of passion in understanding the smell of cannabis and how it relates to flavor and aroma and effect. And, terpenes just in general, I love the description. I don't know where I read it, but terpenes are described as the universal love language of nature. And so they have this way of kind of luring us in, and, the terpenes are produced by plants to repel predators or call in pollinators. And they have these ways of kind of connecting to our olfactory appreciation of smell. And we're all very different in that way of what smells great or tastes great to us. And so with cannabis, there's been this long running kind of idea of indica, sativa, hybrid as the ways to kind of distinguish the different effects that are possible with cannabis. Thanks to a lot of the great work and research of the great scientist Ethan Russo, Dr. Ethan Russo, he really helped kind of I want to say it was 2013 or so, he wrote a paper called Taming THC in the British Journal of Pharmacology that really helped kind of bring context beyond kind of boundaries of the past. And so, with his paper, he really introduced the role that terpene content that are high in particular strains of cannabis the interplay that they have with cannabinoids that are in fact what distinguish the unique, slight, nuanced variation in effects. Whether something's energizing or focusing or inspiring or relaxing, there's a lot of range to the possibilities of effect that cannabis produces. But up until this point, we're very limited in our vernacular, and Indica Sativa hybrid were all that was known. But, again, thanks to a lot of the great research of Dr. Ethan Russo, really helped to kind of bring clarity into this mystery, to give us better tools to understand the plant and the range of diversity it offers. And so, so part of what Ethan Russo helped kind of bring about is just this understanding that, kind of so much of the interbreeding, right, generational interbreeding of cannabis has led to the massive hybridization to where, using these certain growth characteristics, these morphological terms like indica or sativa, they no longer hold their weight to lining up with the chemistry of a given strain, and so essentially, there are still massive amounts of, narrow leaf drug types or varietals. There's wide leaf drug varietals, short, squatty, thick leaves, short flowering versus long, stretchy, narrow leaves. And those designations still exist, for morphological characterization. But again, kind of if you want to get to the understanding of what makes an individual cultivar unique and how that unique aroma and flavor kind of correlate to an effect, you have to kind of come to understand what terpenes are present and available. And so long story short, we started at SC Labs. We've been doing terpene testing since 2013. And since then, we've done over 250,000 terpene tests on cannabis and hemp in California and Oregon. And a few years back, we started working with some data scientists to help us cluster the data and see how it all sorted. And one of the real fascinating insights that we've come to gain, and also in partnership and collaboration with Dr. Mark Lewis and NAPRO Research, we really helped kind of come to a similar conclusion, and that's that, of the hundreds of thousands of strain names out there and just different, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but the thousands and thousands of strain names that exist, the 250,000 tests that we've ran, whenever you sort it, we can see there's really about 6 significantly different terpene profiles that really provide the foundation of like what you were describing. You got the reds, you got your blends, rosés, you have your chart, your whites, and within there's various kind of different flavors and aromas and tastes. And so what we realized is, of everything we've ever tested, everything seems to sort into one of these 6 primary smell groups, and then each primary smell group has about 2 to 3 subgroups or subsmells. But overall, we see about 12 to 14 archetype profiles that really define everything we've ever tested. And so basically, the foundation of that research, we're really grateful and excited for this opportunity to help kind of bring it into the common, kind of consciousness and zeitgeist of cannabis within contests like the Emerald Cup and what we're doing now with the California State Fair Cannabis Awards, because we're hoping to pay tribute to the range and diversity of the plant, and also highlight the role that terpenes really play in designating craft or distinguishing quality or premium quality within cannabis.
Right. And that's one thing that I think we're going to see this continually evolve as the consumer starts to become, more educated and look to, the plants and the products for different effects. That was one of the first things I think, or one of the biggest changes I think I can say that my husband and I went through in our experience with cannabis, from purchasing, from the legacy market years ago, when you didn't know what you were getting, you were just kind of at the mercy of whoever you were buying from. And now we actually have the ability in Colorado to walk into any given store and have variety and be able to see and smell those differences that maybe we didn't even really understand existed beforehand. And I love the fact that, we were talking about the wines, and one of the things that I frequently tell people is, there's a big difference between a Riesling and a Moscato. They're both white wines, but if you put them in a glass and drink them, you're going to notice a significant difference in how they taste. Or even like a Sauvignon Blanc, there's very, very big differences between those. And I feel like cannabis is the same way, and we've just started to kind of crack that code of what these different compounds really bring to the table and offer for the consumer.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's very true. And just kind of tying back in with the, your question around the Emerald Cup, your thoughts around the Emerald Cup. That was kind of a big revelation that I had. I've been, the Emerald Cup in California. It was our first gig as a company, SC Labs, first gig we tested for 2009, the Emerald Cup 2009, and we've tested with them ever since, kind of as their testing partner. And I started becoming a judge, like a flower judge, about 5 or 6 years ago, and just really early on in my judging experience, I kind of could really quickly, easily see the judging bias that existed. The regional terpene preferences that people have with certain strains that they really like. Certain regions are almost allergic to other terpenes, that they don't like at all, and so you can see how much that sways the outcomes of an event, like a competition. And so, but in reality, how can you judge, like, say, Jack Herrer, excuse me, it's proper pronunciation, Jack Herrer, or like Trainwreck or Sage or Durban Poison versus an OG Kush, right? That's a totally different fruit. And so it's like to really, and when it really comes down to it, the smell of gas or the smell of haze, it's like it comes down to personal preference and our olfactory appreciation of cannabis. There's certain statistics about how, for some percentage of people, the taste of chocolate is incredibly bitter, or the taste of cilantro is very soapy, right? And so just kind of those are just illustrating how different each of our own physiology is and what we appreciate as far as the smell or taste goes. And so I think the most fair way to do it, and how the future of dispensary sorting is going to happen, it's like, instead of these arbitrary names, Indica, Sativa, that often don't mean anything and kind of lead consumers kind of in circles to try to find strains that are properly, that they're like most seeking. Being able to help sort everything by group, so that you have desserts against desserts, you have gases against gases, you have sweets against sweets, you have tropical floral, you have haze and haze, and to be able to, I think it's a really important part of the future of a consumer experience. It's like, instead of going into a dispensary and just getting, popular strains of the day kind of pushed down their throat, just, predominantly high in THC, or suggestive selling around certain things that a bud tender might really like. It's about removing that bias and being able to help present it and sharpen one's own olfactory appreciation, because the nose knows, what smells good to me. So if you can help kind of guide somebody's appreciation to where it's like, yeah, you have reds within there's Merlot and Cabernet and Pinot Noir, right? And it's like, and then there's whites, and so like, which one do you like? Because not everybody likes the same thing. And so I think, again, it's really important to empower the nose so we can kind of be able to really find the types of clusters of smells that really resonate with us, because that's one of the coolest parts about it. Is it's like, it's the nuance of cannabis is so far beyond this like basic indica sativa effect, and it's like, oh, you want to talk quote unquote sativa? It's like, well, terpinolene is the Jack Trainwreck smell. That's energizing, cerebral, artistically inspiring. You got pinene, which together with THC brings about focusing effect. It's like pinene, actually, when it's together with delta-9 THC, it helps to decrease the negative memory impairment effects that THC has in short term, right? So it's kind of like a focusing type of quote-unquote sativa. So there's like nuance to it, right? There's also inspirational uplifting, right? And so, yeah, anyway, just there's, I think it's, the future is in kind of radical transparency, into kind of helping kind of people to make the choice that, they're looking for based off, their own consumer knowledge and experience. And so the more we can get towards helping empower people in their sense of smell, it's like there's, appeal to their senses, then can just become that much more of a sophisticated consumer and appreciator of this great plant.
Exactly. And I was so glad to hear you say the nose knows. We've heard this phrase so often in the industry, and I know that there's people out there that disagree, or that they balk at that notion. But I agree with that completely. I feel like if you're enjoying the smell, if you're enjoying what your sensory factors are picking up, then most likely you're going to enjoy the effect that you get from that as well. At least that's been my experience with the products. And it really is a learning process. And I'm so glad to see companies like yours that are now finally starting to quantify these things and give us that data. I foresee a day in the future where when we purchase our cannabis product, it's going to have almost like that nutritional label on the side that tells us all of the different compounds that are there. And we can make these educated decisions about the products that we want to elicit the effect that we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And also, I think a really important aspect to distinguish is, so of the, so at SC Labs we test for over like 43 different terpene compounds, but really 5 to 9 primary and secondary terpenes really define, you can use as the foundation of sorting everything and clustering everything. And from our knowledge, research, and experience, 5 of the 6 primary terpenes that define cannabis are all what are called monoterpenes, which have the lowest point where they'll boil off or volatilize. And so they actually begin to volatilize and boil off at room temperature, and so what happens, one of the realities that we've come to see is, especially in licensed, legal, regulated supply chains, really 60 to 90% of terpene content is lost in the supply chain from the time it leaves the farmer's possession, and then it's handled and jarred and kind of processed, not with any regard to temperature and humidity that it's being stored in. And so just the ongoing kind of continued lack of, I guess, temperature controlled conditions, it leads to the quick volatilization and evaporation of those terpenes. And so just to kind of quickly illustrate a point, THC kind of it seems to be almost exclusively the way that the market and the consumer market purchases cannabis. But on a very sad note, the hyper focus that the market's had on THC exclusively to define quality, it's all but blurred the lines between like biomass markets, the corporate biomass markets, and craft cannabis, because there's no distinguishable differentiating value, which is what terpene content is. Especially since 5 of the 6 primary terpenes in cannabis, again, boil off at room temperature. And so we're really hoping that kind of our work and efforts in California with the Emerald Cup and the California State Fair, we're trying to help kind of reframe this conversation, because it's such a great time of need in California and Oregon. Both states, Oregon hit overproduction like 3 years ago. California, this is our first year hitting it, and cannabis doesn't get better as it sits around. Terpenes volatilize quickly. The longer they sit around, the less they're being controlled temperature and humidity, and they're on. In my opinion, in the future, cannabis deserves and requires a cold supply chain like a vegetable. Because otherwise, the greatest indicator of quality, terpene content, is the thing that goes first. And so for most consumer purchases that are, I think in the future, a consumer will be outraged by, how much they're paying for top shelf quality herb and how little terpene content it has. Because as the terpene content goes away and the cannabinoid to terpene ratio gets further apart, the less flavor, aroma, and effect it's going to have. And so to wrap the point, and I'm sorry to kind of go on, but you could have a strain of cannabis that genuinely tests 30% THCA in the plant, and it could be dried and cured incredibly poorly. It smells like hay, and it could have 0.2% terpene content. That's a 90 to 1 cannab to terp ratio. So there's no more entourage effect. Like, in my opinion, in the future, that's what will define biomass, right? Because that artifact of the cannab to terp ratio is so far apart, there's no other value for that to be represented as a premium flower, or even to turn into an artisan extract, because now, really the only value is to distill it, add terpenes back in the end. But conversely, if there was a strain of cannabis that had 15% total THC, which gets no love, sadly, in this market, it could have been harvested, that batch could have been harvested in the middle of the night, dried, cured, preserved under well below room temperature, and had could have been picked up in refrigerated trucks and stored at vaults at distribution companies in refrigerated conditions, to the point where it's at a retail dispensary. There could be, so the average terpene content across everything we've ever tested is about 1.4%. But in the flood, the average goes down at the dispensary shelf to about 1% or less, which is getting in the realm of terpene-less or entourage effect-less. but the potential in the top 5 percentile of what defines craft or quality from our analytical perspective, the potential is 3 to 5.5% in dried flower. And so in that instance, you have 15% THC, 5% terpenes. That's a 3 to 1 cannabis terp ratio. So whatever the terpene is in there is going to provide a substantial entourage effect and user experience of flavor, aroma, and how that nuance effect hits you.
Right. And I love that you bring that up about how the THC chase has really diluted the industry. I feel like so many products out there are trying to get to that highest level of THC, or I've heard the stories about California dispensaries that won't accept anything that have less than, say, 25% THC. But yet I've had strains of flower that only test out at 17% and provided a much better effect than any distillate product that I've ever had. So it's funny to me to hear that the industry is kind of being pushed that way by this consumer demand for these high THC tests. But yet the products themselves then end up being, kind of diluted and not, with muted effects, and you really don't get much from them. Whereas if we focused more on the terps and we focused more on that total cannabinoid terp profile that's there, I feel like people would get so much better experiences from their products that they're purchasing in the legal market now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a massive disconnect, because if you talk to anybody that's as close connected to cannabis as possible, like from the cultivation, flower end, farm end, it's always been known terpene content is way more of an important. You open a bag, does it bomb a whole room? Is it cured and still sticky? It just that's always been the guiding, cannabis's guiding compass north of like what quality is. And that's always been known on the deepest of cultural ends. But through this like regulation, legalization project, with cannabis and, without the discernible understanding that terpene content is the major thing, it's like there's been this just hyper focus on THC that, it's like it really has, it's done a lot of damage, and it's homogenized cannabis towards wherever, 65% of the market in this focused run for THC strains. It's pretty much brought the market in California. 65% of the herb grown this year was dessert profiles, right? So gelato, wedding cake, ice cream cake by Skittles, by gelato, so it's like a very awesome profile, but the hyper chase and focus for THC and that profile, it's led to the homogenization of cannabis in the state of California and Oregon for the most part. And it's also led to a great almost extinction of biological diversity of all the really rare profiles that people, have had or coveted for long periods of time, but don't necessarily have a market for, because the whole market just wants THC and gelato, and so, it's very interesting because for the consumer and for the average buyer at a dispensary that's buying off of spreadsheets with THC numbers and like strain names, there's this massive disconnect with the reality of what defines quality. And so, that's where I think there's this great moment and opportunity that we have to help empower another way in California, with our work with the Emerald Cup, because the Emerald Cup in California is really one of the greatest cultural events of appreciating cannabis and, all that it offers. And then with this California State Fair, which has been happening for over 130 years, it's the first year they're going to be honoring cannabis as a cherished crop of the state, cherished agricultural crop of the state. And so, 95% of the awards are all terpene based. And so we're, sorting everything by terpene content, and then total terpene content and the cannabis to terp ratio are the metrics that are going to weigh the winners of each category. And so, we're really hoping that these efforts to, within these, because the state fair is also the civilian public, the Emerald Cup is the culture. And so we're hoping through these two avenues to help retell the story in a better way, to help inspire a better way. Because, a lot of people in California and Oregon are, very sadly facing an extinction level event on the farm level as a result of the market not being able to in any way value why their herb is better quality, as opposed to, this is 30%, yours is 30%, sweet. What's the difference? Even though this might test 1% or less terpene content, and at the farm level, it's like 5%, 500% above the market average, and so, yeah, we're just hoping we can do our part to tell a better way and bring and inspire hope towards the future. Because, one last thing I'll say on that is, kind of with the prohibition of alcohol when it ended, there was an 80-year consolidation among a few families before the 1980s and 90s, when craft beer and craft liquor and spirits like really created a market and now have exploded, right? With cannabis, the prohibition of cannabis has ended, and you have Budweiser and so David and Goliath, sprinting out in the same field. But the sad reality is, without any appreciation on terpene content preserved, David actually has a handicap, and if we can't show another way, and THC is the only way it's going to go, then we're going to see a repeat of what happened during the end of prohibition of alcohol, and craft will be all but obliterated until kind of there comes this time where the market matures and becomes a little more sophisticated and having more to value than just THC alone.
I really, really hope that there's enough of us out there that have been in this long enough that we're able to have a loud enough voice to say, don't let that happen. Because I see it happening too. I really do. I hope that the craft industry is able to hold on. I think there's a lot of us out there that do prefer, our boutique, smaller operations. I can tell you from experience here in the Colorado Springs area, most of the product that's in Colorado Springs smells like hay. It's really difficult to find a really good terpy, wonderful flower that is going to be full of effect, because it all smells the same. Sometimes it even all looks the same from one dispensary to the next, and we just know that that's not the way that cannabis is supposed to be grown and the way that it's supposed to look and smell. And so I'm glad to see that we are quantifying this and we're getting it out there and we're starting to include it in these events to be able to emphasize how important those smells and those flavors really are in these various products.
Yeah, we can definitely do better, and we can hold kind of quality to a better level, and it doesn't have to go in this exact way. It's really sad to me what you just described, because that's largely my consumer experience as a consumer of cannabis at dispensaries in this new regulated, licensed, more sophisticated space. It's that everything's pretty much flat, dry, disappointing. I paid top shelf prices and leave actually disappointed. And in every instance, I can always find kind of better herb the closer to the farm I can get, and that just and so and one thing, kind of one observation we had also up in Oregon, because I know Colorado's been going through it as well. We've had SC Labs up in Oregon kind of for the last 5-6 years, and one of our observations that we had when because Oregon in a lot of ways has been kind of the canary in the coal mine for the cannabis space, that reached and hit overproduction first 2+ years ago, and going into kind of the flood, everybody was running around with 38% results, and 30 was the new 20, and you couldn't even sell your product if it wasn't out. And it was just, and there was so much fraudulence in the test. Still to this day, there's so much fraudulence in the testing space. Just juicing numbers, and and just all but just has helped further destroy and implode the market. But one big realization we had is when the flood really comes in, and the average terpene content in the state goes from like 1.4 to like 1% or less by the time a consumer makes a purchase, there comes this moment and opportunity, and because really in those times it exposes producers and people that are moving cannabis. It exposes their infrastructure, whether they even have the ability to care for the terpenes in their possession. Because now that things are sitting around, slower to move, again, it doesn't get better. It goes bad, it goes flat, it goes hay. And so there comes this moment opportunity for those on the craft side that have really worked to optimize all aspects of terpene preservation to where they're controlling temperature of harvest. They're like maintaining continued cold supply chain conditions, from where it's being stored and, past drying and curing to where it's stored, and, maintaining 48 to 58 degrees like temperature and 48 to 58% humidity, right? Those types of things will lock in and preserve terpenes in perpetuity, and the less fluctuation that the flower is exposed to from day-to-day temperatures and humidities, the more it preserves. And so for those that have an optimal supply chain of continued cold, like treating it like a vegetable, like if those people are able to deliver 3 to 5.5% dry terpene content in dried herb, again, if the market average is 1% or less, if you come in, for those that have optimized their supply chain conditions and abilities to bring and deliver 3 to 5.5% herb to the market at the point of retail purchase, like that, like those, there comes this time where brand loyalty and kind of people making themselves permanently part of the market kind of are able to happen, because again, if you're at 3 to 500% the market average terpene content in a time where everything smells like hay and looks the same and is flat and dry to the touch, all of a sudden kind of you're able to show another way, or and lead that through smell, and so I'm hoping kind of through the time of the floods, the craft community can really pull it together and understand like the greatest thing they have going for them is their ability to preserve and create batch kind of quality that can get to a consumer. Because most consumers, again, they've never seen what actual farm fresh dank herb looks like. That's 3 to 5%. But for those that figure it out and find brands that have that ability to deliver, a consumer is not going to go anywhere. They're going to keep kind of supporting that brand. And so, yeah, I just pray that there's a way forward that craft farmers can find their way in this space and be able to kind of really differentiate in the quality and craft of what they do. Because cannabis is a lot of things. It's biomass, it's distillate, it's everything, but craft cannabis is a very specific thing. And we need to kind of bring back the definition of what that is and how we can uphold that market for the craft farmers.
So that brings an interesting question to my mind then is, tell me a little bit about what that testing process actually looks like. What kind of technologies do you use to test for terpenes versus, say, just regular cannabinoid processes? And what's kind of the hindrance? What's keeping other producers from running these tests and giving this kind of information to their customers and to their clients?
It's a great question. So chromatography as a tool is the foundation of analytical chemistry, right? There's HPLC liquid chromatography, GC gas chromatography, right? It's kind of like right tool for the right job. All cannabinoid analysis, HPLC, DAD, like so high performance liquid chromatography with a type of detector like a diode array detector. That's an ideal kind of instrument to do cannabinoid testing, whether it's for flowers, extracts, infused products, et cetera, et cetera. When you're testing terpene content, GC gas chromatography, usually aligned with a flame ionization detector are the most ideal setups for terpene analysis. Terpenes, again, very volatile, and so GC is an ideal tool for those. So those are the standard ways to test cannabinoids versus terpenes. So with us SC Labs, we've been doing terpene and we've been testing cannabis since 2009. We've been testing terpenes since 2013, and it's really 13 years being open. It's taken us really about that long to really learn how to do what we do impeccably, an above approach. And one of our observations is, for one, to your question. A lot of labs they can't even accurately identify the correct terpenes. It's pretty worked out what the primary and secondary terpenes in cannabis are. It's like myrcene, limonene, terpinolene, pinene, ocimene, caryophyllene, humulene, linalool, beta pinene, right? Those are the primary terpenes in cannabis. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Like there's slight kind of tiny traces of other terpenes. But you'll see a lot of like lab data out there where it'll show eucalyptol or bisbolol as the dominant terpene. That's kind of more indicative of labs' inability to accurately characterize the terpenes and the peaks that they're testing. And so one thing we learned at SC Labs, right, is like a terpene test isn't something you can rush or create a production run to have be able to do a terpene test, pump out every 15 minutes. Most labs that do terpene analysis, sadly, like they have really crunched runs where they're, have 20-minute run times or so through the GC to be able to pump out results. But with terpene testing, we're testing for 40 plus compounds, right, in these very trace potential amounts. And so what we realize at SC Labs is, you have to have a substantial amount of runtime through your GC column in order to get adequate separation of each one of these trace compounds. And so we have about a 90-minute, like hour and a half runtime, through our GC column on its own, just to get the separation we need to trust the data, right? And so, because if you have anything short, you have these co-eluding peaks where you're misidentifying these peaks as different things that aren't even the right things, right? And so for one, to your question, it's like it relies on quality lab data, and that's kind of each group's own due diligence to vet and identify what lab is going to produce accurate quality data that you can grow and build off of. It's like, and so that's the first part. The second part with regard to I think a lot of people haven't really clicked or connected with terpenes because you have all these like multi-syllable words. You talk beta-caryophyllene, limonene, terpenylene, you kind of glaze people over from the beginning. And so nobody's been able to really process it, digest it in a way that can help kind of really connect the dot. Because whether it's a lab testing terpenes or it's a farmer appreciating and loving cannabis, and it's like terpenes that really bring it together in that way. And for farmers, again, it's like, they've always known that the smell, flavor, and aroma kind of more are the biggest distinguishers of quality. But I don't think anybody's ever done a good job up to this point to really help process and digest it in a way that can help them make better data-driven decisions and understand why these terpenes matter or are relevant to what they do. And so that's where I'm really grateful and excited for this, work that we've done and the collaboration with Napier Research and PhytoFacts, because, it's kind of, from my opinion, it's the most sophisticated way it's been put together in a way to help really provide insight into kind of areas of breeding, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, supply chain, and how a retail can use this tool to sort and understand the dispensary from a more, kind of classified, rosés with rosés, Chardonnays with Chardonnays, Merlots with Merlots, right? It's like, boom, and so, yeah, I think with terpene content, with like this whole conversation, it's going to require a lot of education and thought leadership work that we all need to engage in, because the awareness and the shift isn't going to one day happen from the average consumer having an epiphany or from the average procurement person at a dispensary that's buying off sheets and THC percentages. They're not just going to one day learn it and figure it out. It's going to come from the thought leaders in the space, partnered, helping to disseminate this information from the leading brands in the States, helping to retell the narrative in a different way, in a more sophisticated way, and hopefully kind of in that way, kind of it'll disseminate out. And but again, it's a long uphill road, but it's something we need to take seriously, because it's a race against time. It's like this, we need as a culture to establish this very crucial point of understanding with cannabis terpene content craft, because otherwise, again, it's going to wipe everything out for the small guys, and it's going to just pave the way for the Budweisers of the world just to kind of crush everything. And then maybe in 60, 80 years, there'll be the craft that pops up again. But we could do better, as the grassroots leaders in the game, and so it's kind of on us in that way.
Right. And I think it's these conversations, having conversations like this and really just kind of discussing it and talking about the different things that we're learning. Also, you mentioned the Emerald Cup, and I think as we start to see testing like this and some emphasis being put on those terpenes in those circumstances where we're seeing cannabis products being graded and being, competing against one another for those types of things. I think that's where we're really going to see this kind of educational push about the difference between flavorful, aromatic cannabis versus grass and hay clippings that we see in so many other places.
Yeah, totally. And on that point, and I'm glad you brought the Emerald Cup back up on that, because the Emerald Cup, in so many ways, we've always, every year we've tested for the Emerald Cup. You can see the data of the event and all the entries in the contest. and I almost see it as the microcosm and compare it to the macrocosm of the data across the state. And it's almost like a little snapshot of the each year's harvest forecast and season, right? And ever since we've been doing terpene testing with the Emerald Cup, you can, like, it's been really fascinating to be able to dive into the data and see and derive these insights, and so we have these certain cool graphics and charts that we present oftentimes at different events, kind of helping to illustrate this point. But with the Emerald Cup, all entries are tested and sorted by terpene content, and then anonymized, and then given to the judges all within a color group, right? Red is the Jack and Hayes type class, right? So all red comes together, and you judge those against each other, right? To choose your favorite, even if that's not your favorite profile and you prefer gas, you can still put your own bias aside and choose the best of each class, right? And so that's kind of part of the reasoning and logic behind it. But one fascinating insight with the Emerald Cup is, since we started doing terpene testing, I want to say with the Emerald Cup, it started in maybe like 2015 or 2016. But each year we look at the average cannabinoid content in the event across, 300 to 700 entries, all tested for cannabinoid and terpene. And you look at the average cannabinoid content across all the entries, and then you look at the chosen top 20 winners of the Emerald Cup. And you can always see THC percentage has never had anything to do with what a judge picks. And these are like super expert judge panel picks, esteemed kind of picks of just, really astounding kind of buyers and noses and, connoisseurs of cannabis in California. And so you can always see year after year with this anonymized kind of blind tested and competition, cannabinoid content has never been a predictor of what is going to choose to be a winner by the judges. But whenever you look at terpene content, it's the opposite, right? And so if you look at the average mean of terpene content across all entries, the 600 entries, this year I think there was about 400 entries, 300 entries or so. And so you look at the average terpene content across all those entries, and then what the judge picks winners, the judges pick as winners, you can always see that the terpene content in the judges pick always is at least 1 to 2 standard deviations higher than the average. So it just shows, even in a blind event with expert judges who know cannabis more than most people in the cannabis realm of appreciation, kind of have always, you can use terpene content way more as a predictive indicator of what is likely to win a competition, blind tested, judged by somebody without any kind of data or information around it. And so it kind of, again, it shows the nose, and it really shows how much that, the nose, flavor, aroma, and effect is much more of an indicator for a judge, what is going to be the winner of the most prestigious cannabis competition in the world, than anything that has to do with THC.
Right. So to all those cultivators out there right now that are watching the show, you've been given some hints. Keep it cold storage, harvest in cold, and preserve those terpenes, because that's what wins.
And in the long run, I believe terpenes will prevail, unless they don't. It's like a farmer. That's what's so sad, is the farmer will put their best foot forward. They'll pass the herb off from their possession at like 3 to 5.5%, and the top, but by the time, again, it's the supply chain in so many ways is the biggest wrecker of good cannabis. And so that's where farmers need to be extra careful in vetting your partners. It's like, are your partners caring for your cannabis and your herb as much as you do? Because if they're not taking these certain things into consideration, then half or more value is being lost by the time it gets to a dispensary. And then how are you going to compete in the great flood of the history? So it's like, it's a very serious business, and even though kind of, a lot of people kind of aren't really on the tip, it's like they will be, in order to find a way to make it through this kind of great time and struggle where, overproduction kind of, the whole thing is just, each state's just so confined, as a result of how much production's happening and how much retail space is available. And there's no ability to really differentiate, and just like you said, everything looks and smells and it's kind of all just like flat, and so So, again, I think it's just most important that we all individually kind of, take these things into consideration. And in the future, I believe like anybody that's in the cannabis space will become a master terpene preservation specialist across whatever area of the supply chain that they're carrying the hot potato. Because if they're not, holding that correctly, then it's just lost the value so quickly, and the farmer will never get that value back.
Well, and one thing that I think of a lot when I think about the future of the cannabis space and how all of this, could play out, and maybe I'm just envisioning utopia, but what I would really love to see is, we right now we purchase wines based on regions, and I feel like the cannabis space has that same kind of quality, that there's different qualities that come out based on the regions that cannabis has been grown in. And so you might have a different flavor from things that are produced in the Bay Area versus things that maybe are grown in the mountain regions of Colorado. I think there's just some different flavors and profiles and things that we'll see come through when that market really opens up and we're allowed to have that interstate, interregion commerce that is so desperately needed right now in this space.
I think it's a good dream. I share the dream with you. I agree. It's the future. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you go to a store and it's like you said, it's for one, you don't have a million bottles of all different types everywhere, right? It's like you got your Cabernets here, and then you look and you're like, oh wow, this is Sonoma County, this is Napa Valley, this is like old world France. And then I think being able to, I think that's how, once we can start having this agreements that should be sorted this certain way, then I think it's going to be one step closer to like being able to further value the attributes around how precious these terpene compounds are and how quick they go away. Because once we can agree that okay, it sorts this way, you have Merlots and you have Chardonnays, and you can't compare the two. You have to sort them and present them in that way. But then once that's able to happen, as we're able to just get a little more sophisticated in that way, it's just going to kind of really accelerate the process, I think, to help those that are most terpiest to rise to the top.
Most definitely. So what's in the future for SC Labs? What are you guys working on? What's what's kind of hot over there right now?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for us in our company's history. We actually just over the last few months have kind of announced this really great merger that we've kind of been going through with actually a couple labs in Colorado. So Botanicor and Agricor. We've partnered and merged with them, and we're basically now working on creating the most sophisticated and progressed cannabis lab supply chain in the nation. And we've got some really cool kind of we just recently won a major contract with a national big box type grocery store, organic grocery store nationally, that we developed a national hemp panel to basically meet and exceed all 50 state testing requirements. Because different states, of the 50 states, I think there's 30 something states that have unique hemp regulations. And so in order for us to kind of win over this contract, we had to develop and become ISO accredited, and basically creating this panel that exceeds all state guidelines. So Colorado implemented recently like 108 pesticides testing on hemp products and ingredients. Certain states have like 30, 15 or so kind of heavy metals. Kind of various states have certain microbial impurity panels that other states don't. And so yeah, we basically just kind of did an assessment across the nation of all the requirements. We developed a test that can hit and exceed kind of all those guidelines. And so yeah, we're just kind of really we're focusing a lot of work and effort into kind of helping really bring out our kind of our leadership abilities that we've kind of come to learn here in California and Oregon, with kind of leadership of kind of Botanicor and Agricor in Colorado. And we're really excited about the future. We've 13 years just on the SC Labs end. It's been one of the most educational experiences of my life, and we've come to really learn how to contextualize data in a way to help people make more meaningful decisions. We like to consider ourselves more of a partner in solutions than like just the fee-for-service testing agreement that most people have with their lab. And So yeah, we're just really building out all these understandings that we've come to around terpene preservation and assortment, all the aspects of how and where why fails can happen. We provide a lot of like ongoing technical services and support for clients we serve. As fails pop up, we help really quickly get to the root of those issues to help them graduate beyond them ever being an issue again. And so we just really focused on building the core of what we do as we're starting to kind of bring together our thought leadership and awareness from our labs here in California and Oregon to the lab in Colorado and other states that we'll be kind of bringing our thought leadership to in the future as well, including Michigan.
Fabulous. Now, one thing I do want to point out that you said there that I want to emphasize, and that's, so often I think we look at regulations and testing and labs and the things that have to happen for consumers to have a safe product. We look at that as kind of a hindrance, or some people may look at it as, an us against them kind of thing. But I love the fact that you mentioned that it's a partnership. You're there, labs are there to help these cultivators and these producers really ensure that they are putting out the best quality product that they can. And by doing so, it's going to help them ensure longevity and in this industry and in this space. So I love the fact that you talk about it like a partnership, and not just that you are offering a service to help people meet regulatory requirements, but to really improve their product.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been actually a really fascinating insight. So cannabis and hemp, right? It's the great bioaccumulator of this century. That we're now that's coming out of prohibition times and is now tested to a level nothing's ever in history been tested. And so this massive phytoremediator bioaccumulating plant is now tested to a level beyond anything, food, agriculture, water has ever been held to. And so, in California, a lot of groups are starting to really market behind their cannabis being cleaner than the food system in 90% of the country, than the water in most municipal areas, and so I think that's something really important, about the future of where this is going. Cannabis is, and the testing of cannabis and hemp, it's provided a new level of what should become a standard for products that are, for public health and safety. It's like, it's been really fascinating because since California kicked in kind of, compliance testing for, 66 common pesticides and all these heavy metals and all these things, we've, at our team at SC Labs, we very early on learned that whenever one of these fails happens and somebody has to remediate or destroy their product, that's not something you can just auto email somebody. That essentially that fail of hundreds of thousands of dollars of product because we failed them represents the end of our relationship. And so what we learned really early on is, you have to immediately engage to both demonstrate the quality of our work, but then to shift it into a root cause analysis and actually be helpful to help figure out how and why that happened and where it happened in their supply chain. And so, we like to think of we've created what we call like the fail brain, and so me and a few others on my team, kind of in the technical services department, we begin to predict a region where something was grown by the pesticides that follow it, because you can almost use trace pesticide expressions as a signature to determine the region it was grown. So it's almost like a pesticide appellation signature, because California is one of the largest agricultural states in the nation, and you see this certain list of 3 or 4 pesticides, and you can immediately assert that or understand that that's coming from where the avocados are grown in Santa Barbara County, or these pesticides are up by where the almonds grow in Stanislaus County. And so it's one of those things. Cannabis is now it's starting to begin to hold agriculture more accountable. And any ingredient that comes into the cannabis supply chain now is held to a level of testing that nothing has ever been tested. So we're learning all these really fascinating insights about cadmium accumulation in cacao, and how you need to identify your cacao source, especially if you eat tremendous amounts of cacao or chocolate, because certain areas where mountainous regions are that cacao is grown on can have incredibly high levels of cadmium. Right, and that can't pass California tests or European Union standards. And so, so essentially there's all these micro trends popping up, about the contaminated nature of beeswax, essential oils, All these, everybody's into essential oils these days, putting all over, it's like there's all these different companies that solely focus on essential oils. Well, guess what? An essential oil is an extracted essence of a plant. If that plant was sprayed with pesticides, those pesticides are super concentrated in that essential oil. And so it's just fascinating because, I feel like testing, we're helping to be a safeguard for this plant, to help it become not compromised. And I feel like the levels of testing requirements that are on cannabis now and hemp to come for public health and safety, I feel like they're going to be the biggest barrier of entry for big alcohol and big tobacco to come in and grow cannabis, or big ag. You can't just come flip 40 acres of genetically modified, destroyed soil into growing cannabis, because guess what? It's going to test dirty for a really long time. So I really feel like deeply in my soul that cannabis is here to do a lot of good, and one of them is to help encourage a better way for ag and for other supply chains where companies are producing products for human health and safety. And because guess what? Nobody's given given an ish about that, and it's led to how much disease and disorder exists in our world these days. That's tied to the industrial pollutants and chemicals and pesticides of the past. So
100%. Absolutely 100%. And I can say this because my parents were farmers in the Midwest, growing corn and soybeans for decades. And I lost them both to lung cancer because of the chemicals that they were using on the fields. And so, I worry about that. I think about those things. I think about, the land that they farmed. If somebody comes in now and they start to grow hemp for a consumable reason, all of those products are going to be contaminated, like you said, for several years. And so I feel like there's steps that need to be taking place in order to properly ensure that these products are being produced in a safe way and in a responsible manner, and taking these kinds of things into consideration, because so often it's not. And I worry about those things. I really do. And so, I'm a big supporter for labs and for testing these products. And I feel like good, ethical companies that are really, truly wanting to put out a good product don't need the regulation to do the proper thing. But unfortunately, there's so many companies out there that we kind of have to, twist their arm with a little regulation and say this has to be done, because there's just too many things in our world today that can lead to the contamination of products that people are looking to help them. And I think that's just the most unethical thing that we can do, is allow those contaminated products to hit the shelves.
I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting just in the world of hemp, because hemp is such a misused term, right? 90% of farmers that are growing hemp in the nation aren't growing hemp. They're growing type 3 cannabis, which is high resin, big flower producing drug cultivars. Type 3 cannabis is really high CBD, very low THC, but is super resinous, large inflorescence that it produces. It's not industrial fibrous hemp, right? Nobody's growing that because that doesn't produce cannabinoids. So everybody's been growing almost exclusively for cannabinoid content. But to your point, I'm very sorry to hear about your parents. It's too sad how common the story is, and how much, these, World War II poisons of the past turned modern pesticides of the future, have left such a wrecking kind of effect across the planet, not only on the life cycles of the ecosystems of life where these are sprayed, and the insects and the bugs and all the animals, but the people that are downstream of that food and what it does to the microbiome of our gut, and how that leads to all the chronic disease of the future that we have and are currently just exploding in all these new diseases. And so I think it's we have to maintain this eternal vigilance, to kind of uphold cannabis to this new level, because it's not about, there's certain people that are like, oh, testing, it's such a burdensome thing. We should just test and regulate it like agriculture. Well, guess what? If you peel back testing regulations for public health and safety on cannabis, there was nobody ever had a chance. If Monsanto and Bayer and, big alcohol and tobacco and all the, biggest corporate polluters and destroyers of the human diet and life cycles of, insects and plant, if they could just come in and do business as usual, and just continue to spray and pollute and destroy kind of the plant or compromise the efficacy and safety of this plant. It's like nobody ever had a chance. But when it comes to hemp products that are CBD, what are the types of patient populations that are consuming those? A lot of like elderly, a lot of sick patients with cancers and autoimmune conditions and like gastrointestinal tract problems. It's like we cannot compromise this plant and the medicine that it's here to bring. And so I feel very strong on that, and I feel very strong that it's like if there was ever a rollback to test cannabis like lettuce, like yeah, nobody ever had a chance, and Monsanto and Coca-Cola won from the beginning, and they're just going to keep polluting the world as they can. But on a bright note though, and I'm sorry to just kind of run on the idea, but in California, we're seeing profoundly real effects on cannabis, helping to bring agriculture to a level of accountability that it's never had. And think about it like this: where cannabis is planted, and licensed and able to be legally grown, if it's in an ag land area or an industrial area, it's almost like a transparency beacon. Boom, pesticide, boom, you just hit from all these direct, and so now the people have to destroy and remediate products. They didn't spray those pesticides. How are they there? And now through this process of crop insurance claims, we're seeing crop insurance, because in agriculture, farmers required to carry crop insurance, not in case they like screwed up and lost their crop, but in case they get sued and held liable because their spraying affected another farm. No crop insurance claims were ever done before cannabis, unless it was dicamba overspray that wiped out somebody's farm or another, or Roundup or whatever. But nothing has ever been tested like cannabis, even organic agriculture. So nobody's ever held farmers to account. But now that cannabis is like a transparency beacon planted in areas where ag happens, it's like when kind of you fail for a pesticide, now a farmer can hold another farmer accountable, get a crop insurance claims. So crop insurance is skyrocketing. And also, last thing I'll mention on that, there's this national group called Crop Protection Services. They're like the largest national wholesaler and retailer of like big ag products and pesticides and dirt and all the things. But they also have a division of their company that will go out for a yearly fee and they'll spray whatever pesticides. You grow almonds, then you pay me however many tens of thousands of dollars a year, and Crop Protection Services will send out some applicators to go just bomb your neighborhood, and your orchard with all your allotted pesticides and fungicides and herbicides, and then they'll just drive home 3 hours away without any care of where that pesticide landed or the wind conditions it was sprayed under. And so just to wrap the point, so in Santa Barbara County, where the avocados are grown, in California, Crop Protection Services had 80% of the contracts with avocado farms, and as a result of cannabis now being planted and licensed and legal in those areas, they canceled all contracts with all avocado farmers, and because they do not want to ever get held liable. So now farmers that spray pesticides, now they have to spray at their own accord, with regard to the Federal Insecticide, Rodenticide, Fungicide Act. So they now have to be responsible about wind conditions, times of day. Now they're not spraying out of planes, just full disregard of the federal guidelines on spraying. So it's slowly happening, but we're watching it in real time. Cannabis start to bring ag to a level of accountability it's never been. And that goes with wine, viticulture as well. But yeah, it's fascinating times.
So I'll take that back one more step, and I'll say that it's labs like SC Labs that is forcing the cannabis industry to be accountable, which then is enforcing these new standards and restrictions in agriculture. So I really feel like it is the science and technology that is pushing forward these new standards and really kind of changing things for the better, both in cannabis and obviously in agriculture, because now it's bringing awareness to just how long these chemicals really are, continuing to contaminate our world and our environment. And I really feel like, it's like you said, we're going to work hand in hand between cannabis and agriculture to help maybe clean some things up. I look forward to the day when farmers in the Midwest, are mandated to grow some hemp just to help clean the soils, force it into the rotation education at least to help, do some of that, to help clean up the environment. I think that's something that needs to be explored, in the future. But I cannot thank you enough, Alec, for coming on and having this conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours and continue to talk about all of this exciting stuff that's happening, but we'll have you back again and we'll talk more. Obviously, it's a big growing topic of all of these different things that we're learning about cannabis, and it's just been fascinating to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. This has been wonderful conversing with you.